as the theme goes, I think we're all trying to navigate this storm of a, a situation, both in our personal lives and our home lives. And we have an amazing speaker that actually some of you know, she's been with us for a while. But just before I introduce her, I just want to start with some reminders. The first reminder is to still keep with the online community. Please download our mobile app if you don't have. We'll update you on how to register for all our upcoming events. As you can see, they're very popular now, and we've already got 3,356 hours behind us. I think Nicole will put the links into the chat box now. So download that app and yeah, see what's coming. And obviously it gives us access to a whole lot of other tools like our website and newsletters and all of that as well. Just in terms of the app, it's on your Google Play Store, and you can also look at your iStore and just put that through, but the link is coming up now. In terms of the housekeeping, please keep your microphones on mute because it will impact on people trying to listen to our speaker. Your camera's off until we get to the Q&A portion, which is towards the end of the seminar. Please use the Q&A tool to ask the questions based on what you want the speaker's content to cover today. So the Q&A box is for or directed to the speaker and some of the panel members if you need. And then also this questions and answers will be posed towards the end so we don't interrupt the speaker's flow. We also have the chat box if you need to ask other questions that's not directed to the speaker. So if you're struggling with hearing and, you know, or accessing the links, that kind of thing, you can chat in our chat box. Or if you just like to also, in line with the Q&A, pose, if you see that, that a question was posed by one of your peers, and you really like that question, give it a thumbs up, and that bumps it up in terms of popularity. And when we actually go through those ones with the most ticks to it or thumbs up will be at the top, and we will answer top down. So if you want certain questions to be bumped up, let us know about that by giving us the thumbs up. In terms of CPD points, Zoom keeps a record of your attendance, so we'll issue those CPD certificates to those of you that requested it when you registered. We'll issue this within a week of the seminar. So now that we got all of that by, like I mentioned, the topic is making sense of the hybrid landscape. And the lady that's going to take us through this is Paula Quinsee. So she's not new to EPA, not new to EPA EduWeb because she's presented before. Her focus area is on developing human soft skills, creating healthy relationships at home and in the workplace to co-create a more human-connected world, a passionate advocate for mental health and GBV, and a basic positive outlook and positive impact on people's lives in general. Paula Quinsee actually is a growth mindset catalyst, and she's helping loads of organizations who are committed to creating a purpose-driven environment that maximizes their employees' creativity, energy, and productivity. So welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much, Radhi. It's so great to be here and to be a part of the EPA team again and EduWeb series. And I'm looking forward to sharing my insights with you all today. Love the engagement as well, so please do post your questions as Radhi's mentioned, and we'll have a discussion at the end of it all. So as mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about how to make sense of the hybrid landscape. It's very topical at the moment. A lot of organizations are trying to put their plans and their strategies together as to how they're going to roll this out, if they haven't already started doing it, but how they're going to roll it out next year with people coming back into the workplace. So what I'm going to be touching on in my discussions today is around understanding what that hybrid landscape looks like, some of the skills that we will need to thrive in a changing environment. And as we've known, the past 18 months have definitely been uncertain and challenging for all of us. And then also some of the transactional pillars that we will need to take into account when it comes to working in hybrid working models, and both looking at the needs from an organization's point of view as well as from an employee perspective. So welcome to the human capital era. If you have not already realized that, the focus right now is all about the human component of our businesses. And there is a huge focus on people and people health and well-being, people productivity, and getting people to be able to work from wherever they are, whether it be at home, remotely, online, or because you may be frontline in the office or in the workplace as well. What we're also seeing is that we have now need to start embracing the fifth industrial revolution. We are no longer in the fourth industrial revolution. We've gone past that. And the fifth industrial revolution in my world, or my view, is just bringing back the one element that was missing in the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution was all about AI and robotics and data, which is important, but it never put a focus or never really looked at the large role that the human component played when it came to businesses. And so the fifth industrial revolution is just bringing back that focus, and it's around connection and innovation and creating purpose and inclusivity, which is also very topical at the moment. If you think about a lot of companies are talking about their DEI strategies, diversity, equality, and inclusivity. So to recap, the fifth industrial revolution is all about creativity, and boy, have we had to be creative over the last 18 months with how we've had to set ourselves up to work from home, how we've had to look at different ways of doing things. So even though our job title and our job function has stayed the same, where and how we work has changed. And so right now, a lot of people, both in their personal capacity, but as well as from a business capacity, have been questioning their purpose. We've been forced to stop and take stock on life and what life means for us and the quality of our lifestyle. And how can we, in a virtual world or a hybrid world, which is what we're looking to work towards, create a space where we work together and towards meaning and inclusivity, which gives us purpose. Purpose simply being something that gets us up and out of bed every day and gives us a place to go to, whether it's a workspace at home or whether it's actually in the office, in the workspace. And that we're doing something that is meaningful and of value, and that our contribution to that is being recognized and valued and appreciated. And I'm not just talking from a monetary perspective. So hybrid workplaces, as I said, are all the rage at the moment. And whether you are looking to implement a 2-day working day, a 3-day working way, or half your staff in for a week and the other half working from home, and then you're rotating, it actually doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. What is going to be important is how you make use of the time when people are in the office. Because if you're just going to travel to work, to the workplace, to sit on your laptop in front of your colleague, then what's the point, right? What's the point of fighting that traffic and commuting when you can do that at home? So organizations are going to have to be very creative around when people are in the workplace. What kinds of tasks and operations and functionality do we make use of in the workplace to leverage our human capital in the workplace? So in other words, access to decision makers, the ability to be creative and innovative and brainstorm together or problem solve together, the ability to have robust discussions around what's working, what's not working, but at the same time, to be intentional about when people are not in the office and other people are in the office, how do we not forget about those people that are not in the office and that they are perceived as not being present and or are unconsciously being excluded from certain conversations or decisions that are being made. We're also going to have to look at taking into account our different types of ways that we build relationships in the workplace. So things like employee onboarding, things like mentoring and employee development, and things like training and development as well. All of those things have changed as we have experienced ourselves personally and in our organizations. But there's also the downside to that, which we're all very well aware of in terms of the mental health conversations that we've been having, which is obviously around the digital fatigue and the impact that that is having on us. Another thing that's going to have to be taken into account is what a lot of companies are grappling with. Some of them have been very bold and stated it already. Others are still trying to figure out how to do that. And that is whether to make vaccination, the COVID vaccination, mandatory or not for employees coming back into the workspace. And that's a whole nother discussion and debate. And yeah, it's very tricky because on the one hand, people have a right of choice. And I see this, and I'm saying this respectfully, I see it as no different to having the same discussion or views and choices around pro or anti-abortion or pro or anti the death sentence, and being pro or anti around what you put in your body or not from a vaccine perspective. So those are going to be some interesting discussions that companies, if they haven't already started having, are going to have, and to be able to apply their minds in terms of their policies and their protocols to these types of things going forward to implement their hybrid working models. One of the biggest requirements or factors that we are going to have to take into account, which we've already seen, but I don't think we've realized how important it is the aspect or the element of trust. First of all, creating a space that talks to that. So psychological safety is a term that's being used if you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn a lot, and if you're part of the LinkedIn discussions, you'll see that psychological safety, or the other term that's used is emotional safety, is a very big thing. First of all, from a leadership perspective, that we trust our employees who are working from home, that they're doing the right thing, and or trusting our leaders and our businesses to make the right decisions when it comes to employee needs as well as organizational needs. But most important is around creating relationships that create a space for trust. And I did a poll on LinkedIn and on Twitter not so long ago, and I asked the question around what is the greatest barrier to having effective relationships in the workplace. And as you can see from the stats, both on LinkedIn and Twitter, the biggest one that came out was the absence of trust. The absence of trust actually prevents us in being able to have effective relationships. Now, this would apply in both our personal relationships as well as in our professional relationships. So going forward, how we engage with each other, first of all, as leaders and as employees, but also as peers and as teams, that creates that trusted space. So communication, how we resolve conflict, how we embrace our differences, and how we try and meet needs to the best of our abilities is going to be a big contributors to creating trust in the workspace. From a leadership perspective, it's also going to require that we take on new leadership skills and start developing those skills, not only for us as existing leaders, but also new leaders that are being developed and that are coming up through the ranks. Before, in the past, we used to do training programs like emotional intelligence or soft skills training or leadership development training, but we need to start now incorporating what these new leadership skills needing to be able to lead in a hybrid working space or a virtual or an online working space, whichever model you're implementing. So first of all, self-awareness from a leadership point of view in terms of how am I showing up and how am I co-creating what's happening in my spaces, both personally and professionally. having empathy and understanding, because now that we are seeing people working from home, we are seeing them as holistic human beings. We're no longer seeing them as that 9-to-5 version that we used to see before COVID, when we were working in person in the workplace. And then when people went home, we kind of forgot about it. But now that we are actually imposing on their personal sacred space, their home, their intimate space, which is where we used to go to before to get away from work. Work has now followed us into our homes. And we're now seeing our employees as holistic people and understanding and getting a view of the real struggles and the challenges that they're struggling with, and managing that home work-life balance and dynamics and caretaking roles, whether it's children or a loved one or elderly parents, whatever it might be. So we're having to bring empathy into the workplace and being more empathetic and understanding what our employees are grappling with. And then on top of that is the challenges that we're seeing from a mental health perspective, and how do we incorporate that into our employee wellness strategies going forward. Servant leadership, I'll touch on that a little bit just now, and also some of the other skills is around documentation. COVID forced us to get online quickly, and we didn't necessarily document the processes and what that would mean working in a remote world. Whereas now it's all around documentation, especially from an onboarding perspective. When new people join the organization or join the team, is there a central place that they have access to, that they can understand ways to access information? Who are the key people that they need to get in touch with? How are you doing your onboarding programs in terms of the company organogram, and not only just the standard perks and benefits and employee expectations and Employee Equity Act and all of those things, but just in terms of being able to function effectively in their current role, or the role that they are being signed up for. And then the ability to build trust. And I've spoken quite at length on trust, but I want to come back to servant leadership. Servant leadership kind of, from my view personally, again, I think it is a little bit outdated, in that it's not about being servants to our employees. It's more about how do we create a place to empower employees by either leading from the front when it's required, or leading from behind when it's required. And this is going to require us to really tap into understanding the individuals in our room, the individuals in our teams, what their different competencies are, what their different strengths are, how they operate best. If we just look at basic personality or profile types, for example, introverts and extroverts, all the introverts are absolutely hands up, no, we don't want to go back to the office, because they thrive in a quieter environment, while the extroverts absolutely need that engagement to be able to function and operate. So we are going to have to be looking at a much more granular level in terms of our employees, and finding ways to empower them to operate at their optimum, to be able to deliver on the organization's strategies and business objectives. So how are we going to be developing our leaders going forward? Not only the existing leaders, but the new ones that are coming through the ranks. As we've all realized over the last 6 months in particular, but the 18 months in general, is that mental health is health. And it is a daily necessity for each and every one of us to be able to thrive and function and operate at our best. And when it comes to implementing our employee well-being strategies, we have to look at the whole full spectrum of what mental health means. It is no longer just the digital fatigue and the self-care routines that we have been talking about over the last 18 months. Yes, those things are absolutely key and important, but it goes much broader than that. And what contributes and what causes those mental health challenges in each of our employees, as well as ourselves as leaders. And some of the key triggers that we've seen is the long hours with no breaks. And it's been very unrealistic for us to operate the same way that we operated in person to what we've been doing online for the last couple of 18 months. All we've done is we've replicated those back-to-back meetings that we used to have in the office to an online environment. And that's why people are finding themselves being stuck behind one Zoom or MS Teams meeting after the other without any breaks in between. Whereas in the office, when we had back-to-back meetings, we managed to have a 5-minute break or a 15-minute break by getting up and moving from one meeting room or one meeting place to the other. Whereas now we're not doing that. We just go from one Zoom meeting or one MS Team meeting to the next. Also, unrealistic expectations that just because we're working from home, we should be online and we should be available all the time. And this expectation that if I'm sending you emails or WhatsApp messages or Slack messages, depending on what channels you're using, that you should be able to respond because you're at home, right? We're not seeing those hours blurring into our personal and our workplace hours blurring. And what are we now doing to start putting down some boundaries, not only for ourselves by being able to push back, but by corporates recognizing that it is unsustainable. And they've already started seeing that with some of the challenges that they've had with employees. And I'm going to touch on a bit on that some more just now. But also job security. A lot of people's job security has been sort of wobbly, with threats of or real experiences of things like salary cuts, job losses, and even businesses closing down, which has spoken to our very basic survival. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy and our basic needs of survival, putting a roof over our head, food on the table, and providing for our families. And when you have that stress and anxiety on a daily basis around how am I going to provide, how am I going to take care of, it obviously contributes to huge stress and anxiety and the repercussions of that. What a lot of us have been talking about is lone working, but what we've been really meaning is around people that are living on their own and living alone, which is very valid. And there's research that shows the impact on our immune system when it comes to chronic loneliness, that impact on our immune system is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, making it more severe than obesity. But what we haven't necessarily spoken about and taken into account is lone working in terms of team environments. If you happen to be a sole department or a sole person on your own because you have a specialized job or a specialized task, or because your company structure is very flat and it may be you and your leader and your team, you don't have that support structure necessarily to tap into in terms of other peers and colleagues that you can tap into. And so, yes, definitely, it's almost the same as living on your own and alone. You don't have those support structures. You don't have those people to tap into. You don't have that rapport. You don't have that sounding board to bounce ideas from. And then a toxic workplace culture, which we've started to see, and it's been put under the spotlight. But some of the things that I've mentioned around the back-to-back meetings, not respecting people's personal time versus work hours, unrealistic expectations of being online all the time and being available, and then lack of support from managers, peers, and organizations. And I've heard stories from both extremes and both perspectives where some leaders who did not have the capacity in the beginning or the early days to manage teams online resorted to things like micromanaging. One employee was telling me that in the morning they had to have a check-in call with their line manager as to what they were working on for the day, and at the end of the day they had to submit a timesheet. And this is how they were being managed, and that was causing great anxiety for this person. And then on the other extreme opposite, I've had someone share with me that they felt like they were in this big black hole because they did not hear from their manager. Unless they specifically reached out to their manager for something, there was no communication, there was no connection, there was no rapport, no response. And so they felt unsupported and that they were treading water on their own. And so these are all triggers and things that have contributed to some of the mental health challenges that we've been seeing, that we've been hearing about, that we've been experiencing, and that, of course, obviously, that we've seen the stats with that have been published over the last couple of 18 months as well. But our new biggest concern is that of burnout, because we are stretched in so many ways. And from a personal point of view, in our personal world, that personal anxiety and stress of the uncertainty of the world around us. Yes, we've now, over the last 18 months, we've now settled into a new routine, and that routine is working from home. We've got to grips with how we get our kids off to school and back, and how we deal with them in the afternoons, and how we juggle our schedule around having to do online teaching, for example. We've learned how to manage our home work-life dynamics if we have our partners working at home as well, and how we've had to work around each other and find our own space at home. And people have now established new routines and they're settled, but they're now causing more stress and anxiety, or new stress and anxiety, with now the prospect that we have to come back into the workplace. And now the thought and the dread of facing that commuting traffic in the mornings or the afternoons, and sitting there in the frustration with all of that and leaving the comfort of our own homes is causing concern as well. Things like, how do I dress up to go to work these days when I'm so used to having my work attire in my upper level or upper body, and underneath or below the screen, below the desk, I'm wearing my flip-flops or my slippers because I feel most comfortable in that. So what does my working wardrobe look like? And then, of course, the anxiety around whether vaccines are going to be mandatory or not, or they've already been made mandatory or not. And what does that mean from a job security point of view? So yes, our biggest concern is burnout in terms of the next pandemic. And if companies don't start putting down and implementing strategies and structures that give employees the freedom to push back, to have some time out, to detox from digital online, it is going to contribute to those things. And so some of the companies that I've been working with and in my networks and my groups have started implementing those strategies. So one organization has implemented a no meeting Wednesday. So Wednesdays, there are no online or digital meetings allowed. It's around creating time for you to catch up on your work, your admin, your projects, whatever it is that you're working on, and not be stuck in these back-to-back meetings and then having to work longer hours in the evenings or the weekends to get your jobs and your tasks done. I've also heard from one organization where they are monitoring their employees' activity, particularly over the weekends, because they want to understand why employees are needing to work on the weekends, which should be your own personal time and your downtime to recharge and connect with your family. And if they can't see a trend of certain employees or individuals being online all the time, they step in from a support perspective to understand what is going on, why this person is online, and what can they do to help this person, because they really value employees having time out to be able to recharge, because they understand the value of it and how that contributes to the business and the bigger picture of the business. What we've also realized is that some employees are not safe working from home when it comes to gender-based violence and sexual harassment. Sexual harassment has moved from in the office to online, and gender-based violence we are now experiencing at home in terms of domestic abuse. And we've seen those stats globally spike. And if you attended the last presentation that I gave on this platform, I spoke specifically around GBVH and what that is doing on a global level. But if we just look at some of the stats that we're seeing, a lot over 4,900 cases took place in the home, And when it comes to companies' protocols and policies, a lot of companies, unfortunately, at the moment are not compliant when it comes to the Employment Equity Act and the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that they have not updated those policies to say that the home is now the workplace and online is the workspace, and including that in those policies and protocols, and updating what the repercussions are for incidences should they arise from an employee workplace perspective, but also how do you support employees who are experiencing this in their personal capacity from a home environment. And one of the most progressive organizations that I've seen so far that I've worked with is the First RAN Group, who have taken a zero tolerance stance when it comes to abuse And they've put in, they've adapted their employee wellness strategy to incorporate supporting people from a personal perspective, including things like places of safety to remove employees that are in a crisis or emergency situation. And they support that person in a place of safety and helping them get back up on their feet. And they've done it for a number of reasons. One, to tell and show their employees that they are serious about their employee well-being and wellness. And two, because they want to be seen as an employer of choice. And they're using this as part of their strategy to not only retain talent, but also attract talent. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more as well. So a huge opportunity for organizations right now, heading into November. The global 16 Days of Activism campaign kicks off on the 25th of November to the 10th of December. And if you as organizations have not yet done your annual sexual harassment awareness training for your employees, now is a perfect opportunity to leverage that campaign and update your policies and your protocols and do your compliance training by doing sexual harassment and awareness training, and underneath that banner, also making employees and managers and leaders aware of the potential risk of employees working from home and domestic violence and domestic abuse, and how to equip them to deal with those things. As well as right now, again, an opportunity to do policy and audit reviews to ensure that they are compliant, because they risk criminal liability if they aren't compliant, and potential CCMA cases in this regard. And also, you know, when you do update your policies and your protocols and your training, but not only from a victim perspective, but also from a perpetrator perspective. Because just like we have victims in our organizations, we also have perpetrators. And we need to provide structures for both to get help equally. And that also falls under your DEI strategies. We can't be talking diversity, equality, inclusivity if we are not creating a space for both victims and perpetrators, but across all the spectrum, the whole spectrum as well, including LGBTQI. So we need to look at taking a holistic approach when it comes to hybrid working spaces going forward. We need to look at what that means from a health point of view. We need to look at what that means from a hygiene point of view. And we need to look at what that means from a safety perspective as well. We also need to look at it from an individual perspective in terms of having these kinds of conversations in our homes, in our communities, and what health and well-being means for me versus you, versus my partner, versus my colleague, because as we've realized, there is no one size fits all. What mental health means in my world, or wellness in my world, is potentially different in your world. So you've got to find what works for you. But how do we support those differences? How do we embrace them? And this is going to be your mental health strategy is critical to your hybrid working models going forward, and the need to integrate it into everything that you're doing going forward. And that needs to be centered to your business objectives and your business strategy and your business plans that you're rolling out. One of the things that we have seen, particularly when it comes to mental health, in terms of being addressed, the stigma is lost in mental health priorities that are being spoken about and being incorporated and addressed in the corporate workplace. Now, one of the things that keeps or prevents people from speaking up around mental health and GBVH and sexual harassment is the stigma that is associated with this. So how are we going to remove the stigma in our workplaces when it comes to helping people speak up and speak out about it? As I said earlier, mental health is health. It's not a separate thing. It is one and the same thing. So we need to start removing the stigma around it and allowing our employees and our leaders to speak up and speak out about it and say, I'm not okay. That it's okay to phone in and say I'm sick just as much as it's okay to phone in and say I'm sad, because we're allowed to feel those things. Now, when I did another poll on LinkedIn and Twitter around awareness training around sexual harassment and in the workplace, the results showed that almost 80% of individuals have either never had training on this or it is a self-study requirement. And when you leave people to study at their own to their own devices, especially when it's a topic or something that is perceived as not part of my everyday working environment, or a skill that I need to do my job, it's going to keep being pushed to the bottom of the to-do list. So be aware of this going forward and have a look at what does your company and policies say when it comes to sexual harassment and awareness training in your organization. And how often is it being updated and how often is it being done? Because this is a huge opportunity as well for organizations. Looking at ways of, particularly in the hybrid working models, around how do we prevent work addiction. So as I mentioned, encouraging people and employees to take time off, respecting their personal space, create a culture, a healthy corporate culture that embraces mental health and well-being, that removes the stigma associated with it, and that allows people to be healthy and well so that they, in turn, can deliver on the business objectives and strategies. Your people are your business, and if your people are not well, ultimately your business is not going to be well. As leaders, as part of our new leadership skills that we're needing to develop, is we need to lead by example. We need to be brave and courageous, to put our hand up and be vulnerable, to show that it's okay to be vulnerable and say, I'm not okay today, I'm having a bad day, I'm juggling my kids at home and their school projects, or whatever it might be, but also by putting down boundaries and respecting those boundaries for your employees and within the workplace environment, and empowering people to say no and not feel guilty about it in the process. No is a full sentence. We don't need to justify our no, but we often do. We often find ourselves having to justify why we can't do something or why we can't attend to something right now. And we shouldn't have to do that, because we actually accept other people's no's straight up front without any question or thought. But we don't apply that same thought process when it comes to ourselves and us being able to push back. 3 critical skills that we will all need to develop at an individual level going forward when it comes to not only surviving but thriving in hybrid working models and in this ongoing ever-changing landscape, because people are predicting the 4th wave coming towards the end of the year, just the same as we had the wave at the end of last year. So looking at those trends and what's seasonal, there is a prediction of the 4th wave coming, but how we need to take care of ourselves and be able to go from survival to thrival. So first of all, self-leadership. Well, now what self-leadership really means at the end of the day, it's simply consciously being able to influence our own thoughts and behaviors to achieve our goals, whether it's our personal goals and or the organizational goals. Because before you can lead in the home, before you can lead in the workplace, you have to be able to lead self. So self-leadership, one of the skills. The second skill that we have to develop for ourselves going forward is that of self-discipline. And all that self-discipline really is finding a compelling reason to do something, to commit to it, and to see it through to the end, whether that's in our personal lives or our professional lives. But where that comes handy is if I'm working from home and I know what my deliverables are, I have to be disciplined and find my own way of structuring my day to do the job, because this is what is going to build trust in my peers and my leaders and my organization that I as an employee can deliver and I can do what it takes to deliver, but also around being able to prioritize and understand what is a priority, what is important, and what can be delegated or what can be done in non-urgent times or outside of crisis times and crisis windows, or what can be shared with others to help share the load. And then the third skill that we're going to need is adaptability. Now, everybody often refers to this as resilience. And resilience has been made out to be this huge, big, amazing skill that we have to go and find and acquire for ourselves. When very simply put, adaptability or resilience is adaptability. And adaptability really is just the ability to face difficult situations while keeping our emotions in check and the ability to function and operate at the same time. So being flexible and adaptable, and boy, have we been challenged on this level over the last 18 months. But as we move into hybrid working spaces and we may be required to be in the office certain days a week, we're going to have to learn to be adaptable and flexible to those new working ways and working spaces and working environments. Now let's talk about the transactional pillars in an organization. When it comes to relationships, and in this context, I'm using organization and employee as a relationship. And we transact in our relationships on many different levels. And so going forward is understanding what are those 5 pillars that we transact through when it comes to the workplace as an organization, but also as an employee. The first pillar is what we call the functional pillar. The functional pillar is when it comes to our roles and our tasks or our function in the workplace. Are we being stimulated? Are we being empowered? Do we feel engaged? Are we provided opportunities to learn? Is the organization providing that for us? And are we also co-creating it for ourselves? That helps us to function at our best. The second pillar is the emotional pillar, and this is where psychological safety and emotional safety comes in, or what is often termed as emotional intelligence. Do I as an employee feel connected to my organization and my leaders and my team? Do I feel valued? Do I feel trusted? Do I feel that my wellness and my well-being needs are taken into account? And from an organization perspective, are my employees engaged? Are they connected, or are they disengaged? And is the environment dysfunctional? Do we value our employees, and how do we show them that? What do we do to show that their contribution is being valued? Because it's not just about the salary that you are paying them every month. How are you showing your employees that you're trusting them? If you have monitoring software on their laptops and their devices, that you're monitoring their behavior and when they are and when they aren't online, that is sending a signal that you don't trust them. If you're not hearing their contributions, their views, their opinions, their ideas, their solutions that they're coming up with, you're not engaging with them. And if you're not putting adapted, integrated employee wellness and mental health structures in place that shows that you are serious about your employees' wellness and well-being, you are going to have a revolving door with your talent walking out the door and very little new talent being attracted to your organization. The third pillar is the physical pillar. This is around your workspace. So first of all, as an employee at home, if I'm working from home and that is my workspace, do I have the comfort that I need? Basic comforts like stable Wi-Fi and connectivity. We've all experienced this, and it can be so frustrating when we're trying to do something or contribute to a meeting, an online meeting, and we lose connectivity or we sound like we're in a fishbowl. Do we have access to the basic things that we need? Things like data, a printer, a chair that meets my ergonomic needs. What is my experience like if I'm working from home? How connected do I feel to my organization without being in that physical workspace? And do I have access to the resources that I need to be able to do my job? So, for example, access to systems, to processes, to information, to data, to people. And it's the same from a corporate or an organization point of view when it comes to that physical workspace. So if you are putting a hybrid working model in place, what does that look like now? Because a lot of companies have given up their official workspaces and have moved to shared workspaces. What does that mean? What is that experience that you're creating? How comforting or comfortable is it? How easy is it to access? I was working with an organization, and one of the frustrations, it was the smallest little thing, but it was frustrating employees to no end when they came to work every day. And until we actually sat down and had the conversation and asked what wasn't working, would you believe it or not, but it was actually about parking. There was not enough parking in the organization to cater for everybody, for all the employees that were traveling to work. And people were getting so frustrated driving around and around trying to find parking before they even got into the workplace. And this was contributing to that grudge purchase of coming to the workplace. It wasn't a nice experience for employees. Then the financial pillar, and this talks to productivity and output. So do I have clarity as an employee on exactly what is expected of me in terms of my role, my task, my functions? Do I know how my performance is being measured? Do I know what my benefits are, and have my benefits been updated or modified to accommodate and adapt to this new hybrid working environment or this online virtual world? For example, in the past, pre-COVID, we may have got things like travel allowances. With people not traveling anymore, maybe we do away with travel allowances and we give them data allowances that they can have data access and work from home. And then recognition and reward programs, have those been updated, and are they relevant in an online, virtual, or a hybrid working world? You know, because how do we recognize and reward people if they're not in the workspace before? Before it was easy, we would have a social gathering, we would have drinks after work, or we would have a team gathering or a conference or a seminar in the workplace where we got everybody together and we might have handed out awards or had gala dinner evenings, those kind of things. We don't have that anymore. So how are we going to be creative and innovative with those spaces and those needs? Or are there even needs going forward anymore? But at the end of the day, the most basic human need that we all want is we all want to feel valued and we want to feel appreciated. So how are we feeling valued and appreciated outside of only the money component? And then there's the fifth pillar, which is the spiritual pillar, and that is around values and culture. How are companies now recreating their culture in a hybrid environment? Because one of the biggest concerns in the last 18 months is how do we keep our company culture alive in a remote or a virtual or an online space when we're not together? And we miss those little social interactions that we had with each other that contributed to building the culture. The little chats around the coffee station or the water cooler station or the smoker's corner, or cross-functional team pollination because we could chat to people in other departments and other divisions. But a great opportunity right now for a lot of organizations is to review your values, your company values, because your values play a large contributing role in determining your company culture. And just like in the home, where parents create the tone and the culture for children to grow up in and thrive in, leadership creates that tone and that environment and that culture for employees to thrive in. So some of your values may no longer be relevant or applicable in a hybrid working model or a virtual working model. And maybe you need to go relook at them or scrap your values altogether and come together and create new values that are much more relevant and applicable and are being able to be lived in a virtual hybrid working world. Leadership skills, as I said, we've had to change and update how we are now developing ourselves as leaders and the new skills that we need, but also transparency. Yes, the organization does not have all the answers. We don't know from one day to the next where we're going to be. And instead of going from having our usual 5-10-year business plans and visions and strategies that we're working on, right now we've had to look at what strategy are we going to implement tomorrow or next week or next month because of this ongoing uncertainty and the different ways that we are working and how we are working. And then most importantly, DEIAB, so diversity, equality, inclusivity, and the two new ones that's being spoken about a lot is acceptance and belonging. Implementing your DEI strategy together with your mental health and wellness strategy, together with your hybrid working model strategy is going to be key around how do you create inclusivity and equality and embrace a place or a space where everybody feels like they are accepted and they belong. So those are the organizational transactional pillars that we're going to need to incorporate or use as a reference and a benchmark to create those strategies going forward. Because how we go from survival to thrival is going to be key in integrating and bringing people back into the workplace, back into hybrid working models, and making sure that we are kept safe, not only physically safe, but also mentally safe, and from a psychological safety perspective as well, in order for us to all, as individuals, but also as collectives, to be able to bring our best selves to the workplace and deliver on what is expected of us as individuals in our roles, but also from an organization perspective as well. Because at the end of the day, we all want to grow, we all want to thrive, and we all want to live our best lives. So you have a choice. You either have a positive or a negative impact on the world, but there is no in between. And that's what our focus should be on, is how am I creating a positive impact or a negative impact? Because at the end of the day, we all have a choice in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And I want to thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you this morning and sharing some of the insights, and I'd love to open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Paula. Wow. I think you've gotten people stunned into silence. So we have one question. But yeah, just to round things up, I mean, my biggest takeaway is no is a full sentence. And I mean, just speaking for all the people in this virtual room, I'm sure most of them have issues with saying no, because as carers, as people that's helping others, we put everybody first, and you know, we fall into that trap. So my personal takeout is no is a full sentence. Love that. Absolutely love that. I also especially liked your the last model, the
Transactional
pillars. Yes. In fact, somebody asked if you could put that slide up again. I see the chat coming up. So yeah, no, thank you. I mean, such pearls of wisdom, Paula. I see the questions coming in now. Many people are saying what a powerful presentation. But Rebecca in particular said, how do we encourage employees to have the balance, and in brackets, if it exists, and mentally leave the actual workspace, especially since we're working from home and, you know, having to do work and home and everything else in the same space. What's been your experience?
Yeah, you know, that whole thing about work-life balance is a myth. It doesn't exist, okay? But we've been taught to look for it. It's like an elusive unicorn. It's more around work-life integration and what that looks like for you, because everybody's life and lifestyle and circumstances are different. And this is where I think organizations really need to tap into their employees and ask them what's working, what's not working, what would make your life easier or better, either coming back into the workplace and or working from home. I mean, a simple thing that came up in one of the other forums was being aware of schedule clashes. So a lot of people are parents, they have to go fetch their kids from school. Don't schedule team meetings around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon when people have to be out of the office or out of their workspace because they have to travel to go and fetch their kids. It was causing huge frustration, and it was, you know, creating a sense of outsiders, and that those people outside the room, so to speak, weren't visible, and so their input wasn't taken into account. So it's those kind of honest conversations that we'll need to have going forward, because we don't know what we don't know. We've never had this situation before, but also learn from best practices from companies that have excelled in this environment. There are companies out there that have been in a hybrid environment for years, and they've documented their processes as a way of sharing those things. And we can take pages out of their books for ourselves, and a lot of it is going to be trial and error. But if you don't know, if you don't try, you don't know.
Yeah, so the first step is knowing, and that's from the employer side as well as the employee side. I mean, one thing that hit me from a physical perspective of your pillars was, I mean, also having worked in different work environments. One of my training participants basically said, well, you know, they want us to work from home, and then they put pressure on you to put your video on. But you know, my home is like a 1-bedroom house, and I have all my family members there, and I'm stuck in a little corner behind the door, and people will be going in and out. And you know, if I put my camera on, they're gonna see my mom and my cousin and all of that in the background, you know, that kind of thing. So it's employers being aware of those things, as you said, Paula.
And I think that's the big reality that a lot of us, and I'm using leaders, I'm generalizing here, haven't taken into account, because leaders happen to, by default, be in a little bit more of an affluent position. So their home environment is potentially affluent. And there was some data that was coming out from having cameras on, especially those people, like the example you've just mentioned, being in a tiny space and having to share a space with others. They didn't want to put their cameras on because they felt, A, embarrassed, two, it was comparison analysis. So I was looking at my colleague and looking in the background at what their environment looked like. And I was comparing myself to that person and feeling, you know, it was making me self-conscious and self-aware. And so that's why people don't put their cameras on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. John is basically asking, do you perhaps have a sexual harassment awareness program? I wish to compare it with the content of our policy. So yes, John, I think you can, contact Paula.
I'll get in touch. I'm happy to share and chat about that. Yeah.
Awesome. And I mean, guys, that's her passion as well. From Johanna, I'm working for a mining operation. Sorry. Very challenging environment. How do I get to prioritize my mental health and encourage colleagues on self-care to avoid mental health issues?
Yeah. Johanna, so first of all, you've got to find, so from prioritizing your own mental health, what are the things that you need that works for you in terms of your lifestyle and your home situation, your home environment, because different things work for different people. So for example, some people like meditation and listening to music. Other people like going for walks outside in the fresh air. So first of all, establish your own self-care routines that work for you, because that will help you manage your challenging environment. You can tap into what your organization is currently offering around mental health, if they are offering anything at all. If not, perhaps you could instigate something yourself in the workplace in terms of a support group in your lunch hour or before work or something like that, and sharing tips around mental health and healthcare, and perhaps even challenge your organization to, you know, start taking healthcare more seriously. There's enough stats and research out there, and I'm sure this forum itself can also support you in taking it back into your workplace and your work environment.
Thank you. I just see a comment from Rebecca again saying, Rari, what a reality cameras on. It touches to the core of who we are. And it just made me think, Paula, you know, there's this whole thing going around where people have Zoom fatigue. And part of that is not being able to see yourself on the screen. People don't want to see themselves. And if you're sitting in meetings and seeing yourself all the time, that becomes a problem. From a mental health perspective.
There's a very quick solution to that. So on Zoom, you can click on your picture and the little 3 dots at the top, and you can go hide self-view. That way you don't see yourself and you don't become self-conscious and self-aware and end up watching yourself instead of taking note of what's going on in the screen. There's also this perception that because we're online, we can't tune into those small non-verbal subtle cues like body language, which is a myth. We can. But it's a skill that we need to enhance even more so than in person. depending on how many numbers of people are on your screen, but you can. And if you switch your screen view mode to speaker mode, the person that is speaking, you'll be able to pick up those cues and that body language from that person.
Yeah. Just let me see one more question. Are you aware, again from Rebecca, of any policy changes that have been made in organizations relating to how to handle annual leave or different kind of leave days? Is it applicable to handle leave days the way we currently do, or are there creative ways that we can apply currently, especially since people are working from home?
Yeah.
So what works for the employees and the employers?
Rebecca, good question. And I have seen some creative ways. Again, it depends, first of all, on how progressive the organization wants to be in terms of taking this seriously. But one organization, they've implemented what they call Pajama Days. So it's 2 additional leave days that they've given to their employees, and there's no reason, no excuse, no form needed or required. You can just phone in and say, today I'm taking a pajama day. And that just means that you need some time out to do yourself, think something for yourself. No judgment, no stigma, no shame attached to that. I think companies have also started to look at things like half days or taking an hour or 2 off, whereas before we needed to go and ask permission, can I go and fetch my kid from school, as an example, and then rush back and kill ourselves getting through traffic to get back to the office. Companies are now becoming a little bit more lenient and flexible because they now understand it, because people are having to do it themselves.
Great point. Nice ideas also. I think people are really struggling with how do I do it differently, and to learn from each other this way is awesome. I like the pajama day, but I think that's difficult because sometimes people just stay in their pajamas and then there's no culture that you were speaking about as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I said, a lot of people are grappling with, what do I wear to work now that I'm going back to the workplace? I'm so used to wearing slippers and pajama pants or sweaty track pants.
Yeah, I must share a joke. I only this week put on heels because I had to go to a face-to-face meeting. Usually I'm in flats at home. So yeah, that's a reality right now. Aisha was just making a comment. We encouraged, lots of people are saying thank you so much, but Aisha also made a nice point. We encourage to always keep our cameras on and be authentic and showing up in their work environment, with or without backgrounds. We also say hello to kids, cats, and dogs, and becomes a real talking point on who we are. So it can be a connecting experience as well. A couple of more people. Sivamani Sharma was saying the presentation, was also pertinent and informative, and especially since we are basically working remotely. So thank you, Paula. Lots of thank yous, Paula. I'm going through a whole lot of thank yous.
Someone, I think I might have missed it, but somebody said, how do you hide yourself on the screen? So on your little picture on Zoom, if you go to your picture, the top right-hand corner, there's 3 little dots. If you click on those dots, a drop-down menu should pop down and it should say hide self-view.
Yeah.
And I also just quickly Googled on Teams. Apparently, it's not an option. So it is only an option on Zoom at the moment, but I'm sure Teams will catch up and give that. Someone said they sometimes put a sticky note over their video view on Teams to hide their own face. So that's an option.
And you know what's difficult, though, is many of our members are actually from the public sector, and they use Teams. So, I love Zoom, and lots of my public sector people fight with me. But can you see there's nice functions there? Just another one from Rebecca, Paula. As much as employees are empathetic, understanding and embracing employee situations, how do we ensure we have employee engagement, high productivity levels, because the bottom line will affect our jobs? And I suppose with so many people restructuring and all of that, it's a real need.
Yeah, and this is where companies are grappling with how going from measuring KPIs or OKRs or whatever it is that you're using to measuring output. How do you measure output now, and what does that look like for your organization and the role and the function that your employees are doing? For some roles, it's very easy to measure. For example, sales. How many leads have you brought in? How much, how many items or things have you sold? It's much more difficult to do it, for example, someone in an admin function, hypothetically. And this is also going to be looking at global best practices. How are other organizations doing it around and that? At the end of the day, does it matter whether an employee took 1 hour or 3 hours to deliver it? That the fact that they delivered it, and I'm not talking where there's an urgent deadline, I'm talking in general. So if it's taken them an hour to do something that potentially could have taken 3 hours, does that matter? Is it important, or is it more important that they did the job, they did it properly, and it was right and correct and accurate?
Thank you. And I think a lot of our leadership is not used to output management. And that's where we can play a big role in terms of training and that type of thing. So thanks for that. Comment from Tuso. Thanks, Paula. I like how the focus is on both employer and employee, and the emphasis is on dialogue and engagement between the parties. I work with corporate clients and trust that I can support them with recommendations taking from that transaction pillars. So he's also loving that transaction pillars.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that made a big impact for our EAP participants here, or EAP practitioners. So that's, please go ahead, Nicole.
On Facebook, we've also had a lot of people commenting saying, agreed, powerful presentation. We were granted a free mental health day in October, and so true. I no longer have work clothes. Thank you for the informative session. So you've got a few people on Facebook tuning in today as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you. I think that's it from our side. Is there any parting comments, Paula?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to get in touch with me about any of the details that I've shared today, or you've got other questions, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or alternatively, I'll just put my email address in the chat box. And feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to help or point you in the right direction, or share my contacts and network with you as well.
Awesome. So thank you very much for giving us your time and your expertise. It was fabulous. You can just see how many thank yous, they don't stop. So we really learned a lot this morning, both on a personal level as practitioners, but also, just as Radi. Biggest takeaway for me was, like I said, the no. No is a full sentence. Thank you to also Albi for this valuable information from putting the content and all of that together, your time. Paula, thank you for your time. Your contribution is invaluable, greatly appreciated. Thank you for the audience for engaging. Thank you to Rebecca, I should say the questioner the most, hey? And then remember to download our app, guys, and see the upcoming seminars. Next seminar is on the 17th of November, and it's sponsored by Old Mutual. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.